Hello and welcome to Royale National Park. In this video and a few other videos here in Royale National Park, I'm going to be showing you a few things about just some of the shots that I've been taking. So for instance, right here I'm at the rugged coast, I'm at Huggin Cove campground, and I'll show you the map there, and I'm at the coast and I'm just looking at photographing that item down there. It's growing right out of the rock. It's really cool. I thought it was really awesome. And I'm using my Polar Pro filters to really slow that water down behind it. But as I was coming out here, getting on the ferry, and it was just such an adventure. It's interesting how, even though of course this is still home, i.e. the US, we are closer to Canada. I am closer to Canada. And so if I were to kind of come up here and show you back behind me there, that landmass right there is Canada. And it just still felt very much, you know, the whole idea of getting out here, for some reason to me it just really felt like this big adventure I was going on, because, well, quite frankly, it kind of is. You've got this ferry ride, you've got a whole bunch, for me, a whole bunch of driving to do rather than flying somewhere. Did a whole bunch of driving. And then of course once you're out here, it's like, man, I hope I didn't forget anything, because it's gonna be 6 more days until I head back to the mainland. So in these videos, I'm not going to be showing you all of the, you know, the hiking and all of that kind of stuff, telling the story as I go about hiking. I'm going to basically break it down to these individual shoots, these individual locations, and I will be hopping back and forth between the field here and the studio as I'm looking at some of these images that we're talking about here. So I'll also show you places on the map so you know where we're at and what's here. It's a fantastic, wonderfully rugged place. Here's a couple images of just took along the trail getting out here. From the ferry to this point here, Huggin Cove, it was about 4 to 4 1/4 miles. I've got it tracked on the GPS watch, but I forget exactly what it was. About 4 1/4 miles. And then it's a loop trail, so you can, I'm going to end up going back around the other way when I go back, and I'm here for at least a couple of days. I'm going to be taking a look at some sunrises and sunsets here along the coast. I'm going to try and not predict where I'm going, but I've kind of learned not to do that. I've already got a few ideas in mind, but let's just take it as we do it, roll with the punches as it were, and let's just see how it turns out. All right, with this first shot here, with this thing growing out of the rock, I really just loved the idea of the contrasting textures, the idea of that thing, wherever those roots are, that thing is just somehow thriving, somehow living, somehow being able to get the nutrients it needs still, even though it's attached directly to the rock. And I liked the idea of the ruggedness of the textures coming through, and the shapes and the lines and everything else that was going on with how those trunks, those branches, they just come off, they wind around, they do their little things, and they go to, of course, the green and the orange ends, the little fronds on the end. Yeah, it just really intrigued me. But then I thought about the composition. What am I going to do with the composition? The composition has to be something where this piece, of course, is the main piece, but then I wanted to be able to set it in its context. I needed the water. But now that the sun has gone behind a thick bank of clouds, I think I'm going to try another composition. We'll see if it works, where I get the landmass behind it, because this first composition, I focused on just those rocks in the background and allowing those to show, but not allowing anything else. Just this, the water, and those rocks in the background, and that was it. Very simplifying that composition. There were some other images I've been taking of the tree trunks as they kind of go around the rocks and just do their thing. They're really cool how those trunks come and they transform into roots and they work around the rock and they get into the soil. And so that has, for today, has really been intriguing me. I've really been liking what I see there. And as I'm talking, I'm just looking for more images so I can jump to the next shot and just see what I can get. All right, so we'll just catch you in the next shot. It'll be coming up right here. Hey there, the fun continues here at Isle Royale National Park, just a little bit north, about a third, quarter of a mile north, somewhere in there, from the Huggenden Cove camp. I found this place. You just kind of go down that little, we'll just call it a little crevice there, and then there's this whole beautiful section where it just looks pretty much like the Oregon coast, where it's just rocky, it's rugged, and the water just splashing over the rocks, getting you wet. Great thing about this is, though, it is certainly not as dangerous maybe as it might be on the coast, because the waves are fairly consistent, and also it's, if it splashes the camera, not a big deal because it's fresh water instead of salt water. So let's take a look at some of these pictures, both looking south towards the sun and also looking north the other direction, where depending on the light, we have some more directional lighting, we have some more diffuse lighting coming through. I really like the diffuse lighting. My favorite, in pointing north, my favorite shutter speed was right around ½ a second. That's the perfect time for the water to have its little action, its spray action, but you don't get all this, you know, everything going together where it just becomes a soupy, silky mess, which can be very nice. I have done some images like that where I'm really pleased with it, but with all the action, I'm trying to show action, trying to show the water, trying to get that feel of the energy that's in that water as it splashes up and makes its you know, makes it splash, I guess. But I'm just trying to grab that energy, and that ½ of a second is pretty good at doing that. I've gone a little more, I've gone a little less, I've tried it out, and we'll certainly see what happens in post, but I'm really happy so far with my results. I am still hoping that we're gonna get some good color. The clouds have just been blowing through like crazy, and I keep looking at the horizon. It's still about 2 hours, a little more than 2 hours till sunset, so I got quite a bit of time left, and the horizon has gone from clear to completely socked in, so it's really going to be just, we'll see what happens if we get some good color tonight. And even if I don't get good color, I'm still pretty sure I'm going to be able to create something that I'm proud of. And right now I'm starting to get a little bit of rain. I had some rain coming from over that direction, over Canada, but now it's finally hitting me. But I think it's going to barely just get the tail, just the side end of me. It's raining more up that direction, and more further up north, it's getting a lot more rain. All right, let's pick it up in the studio where we analyze these pictures just a little bit more. Hey there, just picking it up here in the studio. We're going to take a look at a few more of these pictures and talk just a little more details about them as it relates to just how fun it was, number one, but number two, just a little more about the sense of the place. And maybe we could look at just a little bit of the post-production and just think a little bit about what happened there. The items that you're seeing here in this video, though, are covering 2 days worth of shots. So was able to get out there on the 6th of September. This is actually a little while ago, and then went into the 7th with what we're looking at in these images. I did get a couple more black and white style images, and I always am a sucker for anything coastal and anything long exposure, black and white. That can really just float my boat. Not that this particular one is a boat floater, but you get the idea, hopefully. This is camp, and that's my little tent there. And I have decided, let's zoom in on that super quick here. I have decided that I'm not going to use that tent pretty much ever again. It's such a pain in the butt to use, and it's so tiny. And it was raining constantly, almost. It felt like it when I was there. And then I've used it since then. And when I try and crawl out of that tent, I just get all wet on my back. And I'm going to sacrifice and carry more weight and have a bigger tent and a better experience for it. So this image here, nice long exposure. Let's take a look at some of the particulars here. We're talking about 20 seconds exposure. Now, most of these images too, I am using a polarizer filter. I have the Polar Pro. Well, I've got a Hoya 2-stop, a Polar Pro 3, and 6-stop circular polarizers. I then also have a Polar Pro 10-stop, which is not a polarizer. So I can't remember exactly what I'm using where here, but I'm pretty sure this is going to be the 6-stop polarizer. I'm at 100 ISO, 20 seconds. Could have been the 10-stop, I suppose, but being that I'm at f16, pretty sure that wasn't the 10-stop. And I remember looking for ways to get rid of some of those glares on the rocks. You just dial in that polarizer and that does it for you. And then of course you can see my basic settings here. It's always important though, when I'm talking images and post-production and things, I definitely go a little more surgical with the approach in all these masks. The brush mask is one of my favorite masks because I can just target exactly where I want, and I just love the varying controls that we get with it. All right, so on the next day, got a few images along the trail, and this is another thing I really enjoyed on Isle Royale National Park, and that is these cedars. I think they're a white cedar, if I remember right. And just thinking about the nature of how those roots interact with the ground, the life force they're, of course, being able to give and supply to the tree, but also then the structure and the form that they're able to, as far as anti-erosion type stuff, whatever else along those lines, they just makes for really cool textures, shapes, forms, and these things just were very intriguing to me visually speaking. And then when you have something like this where we mix these textures, then when they're coming out of the rocks and we have the water and we have the other rocks, all these mixtures of textures coming in, that's just really good stuff in my estimation. We saw this one in the video where I was out in the field there. And just taking a look at some of the settings here, as far as my post-processing, not too terribly drastic in the post-processing, but for sure using, I've got some extra clarity going on in this region, did some cloud vignettes, extra cloud vignettes, then some lower vignettes. So I'm always taking a look at trying to direct the eye, trying to understand what is the experience I want you, the viewer, to have when you see this image, and then trying to make sure I'm able to do that, make sure I'm able to make that happen. I did also use the color grading. So I've got both some shadows color grading where I did cool shadows and then warm highlights. It's a little bit cliche possibly, but I was a little bit more peeled back, I think, on those highlights too, allowing the cooler tones to come in a bit stronger on that. And then when it comes to those southern looks, views, I got a few images, fairly pleased with how those generally came out. But that northern view, these were just amazing. I have flagged so many of these because for the differences, the whatever reason it is for how these waves came about with just this overall form, the overall shape, the overall idea of what those energy lines are about, just really cool stuff. I was really pleased with this view. And also you'll notice as I click through these, and I'm only showing the ones that I've flagged, actually. There's plenty more that I haven't flagged that just has even more nuanced details. It's like, there's so many of these, I just love them. But I was also experimenting with what's happening here on the lower right-hand side with this little element here, this tree element, and then the rocks. The exact shape, the form, the position of where these things come into play and how they're treated, a little bit zoomed in, a little bit zoomed out. I am shooting the Sony a6400 on this island, and that's the only camera I had with me. So when it comes to what you're doing to get to the island, you're limited to 40 pounds, and I figured the Canon system that I shoot with the lenses and all that other stuff, just being bigger lenses, being that it's a full frame camera, it's not something that I wanted to effectively flirt with disaster and have a problem, because I'm there for 6 whole days and I need all my food, I need my tent, I need everything else to survive, of course. And it just worked out a little better to go with that much lighter camera system. Now I did take 2 lenses, the 18 to 135 and the 8 to 16 millimeters, I think it is, or 8 to 18 millimeters, 10 to 18 millimeters. I forget what it is. It's a Sony wide angle. I think it's a 10 to 18, but I honestly cannot remember exactly. Let's see if we have any indication here. So that is a 12 millimeter lens, and then right there it says 10 to 18. So yeah, a little bit of a brain fade, but that's all right. And we'll end on this shot. I think we'll end on this shot, and that is my self-portrait. I always like, when I see my own shadow, it's just like, oh, that's kind of intriguing. If there's an interesting background, I'll go ahead and shoot it and get my self-portrait. In the next video, we're going to pick up at Feltman Lake, and I describe a little bit of what's going on there. I actually soaked my camera here at this very spot. Now, I was actually not down on the bench where I am here shooting. I was up on this ridge. So when you take a look at this ridge, that's about how high I was. That's in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 feet above water level. And then the water just came on a nice big crash and just totally, just really doused the camera, doused me, doused the camera. I tried to stick my arm out to cover the camera, to shield it. It just, there wasn't anything happening. But I'm going to show you, I'm going to talk a little more detail and show you exactly what I did in that next video so that you can understand, oh, this is what happened. This is how he resurrected his camera in the field. So stick around for that. It'll probably be another week or so before that comes out, but stick around for that and you'll be able to see exactly what's going on with not only what happened, I'll tell you more details, but I'll then describe better exactly what the fix was too. All right, well, that will wrap us up for today in this video. Thank you so much again for being here. Thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for all that you do to support the work that I'm doing here. It definitely means a lot, and I really do appreciate it. Until next time, God bless and happy shooting.